and everyone will have the same questions, 90 seconds each. Please state your name, current position, why you are running, and what skills you have that would make you the best candidate. Kirby Brigham begins.
I want to thank you guys for putting on this forum. My name is Kirby Brigham. I am a science teacher. I believe that the skills that I possess that will lead me to gather this great district is one that my grandmother used to say. She said that life skills is going to help you along the way. And so when we're looking at those types of skills, when we're looking at the struggles of how we come about during our daily lives, those are the skills that helps us create policies. Those are the skills that help us gather up information when we go to Congress, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that whoever is elected, that they understand the struggles of the district. And that's one of the skills that I possess. I'm also a community activist. I believe that having a strong background in community is what is going to help us lead us to creating an equitable district. And so those are the things that help. And also as a science teacher, I believe that seeing the struggles of my students and their families is one of the reasons why I'm in this race. And so when we're looking at those things, I don't think that you need a politics background. What you need is to be a fighter for the people, and that's what I am.
Thank you. Next person, Pastor Butler.
Greetings and thank you all, Trinity, for hosting this forum. My name is Pastor Chris Butler. I am currently the senior pastor at Chicago Embassy Church Network, as well as one of the co-directors for a national organization called the AND Campaign, stands for the Campaign for Compassion and Conviction. I am running for Congress as really a mission. I am a kid who grew up in Chicago public schools in the sixth grade. The local school council was going to get rid of my principal. I thought that was a bad idea, so I went to local school council meetings to disrupt those meetings and to push for the future that I thought was necessary. And I think in this congressional election, we're looking at a Congress where there is a bipartisan consensus to do nothing. And more than anything, we need somebody who is willing to go to Congress, refuse to accept the sort of games in the world that as it is, and disrupt the place, work with anybody on any side of the aisle that wants to do things to improve the lives of everyday people, and stand up to anybody, regardless if they're in leadership or even in your own party, if they're going to stand in the way of improving life for everyday people. I've been doing that my entire life, from that sixth grade experience until today. And I look forward to doing it as your next congressman from the 1st Congressional District.
Thank you so much. We don't have a clock that you can see on the screen, so you will hear me give you the 15-second warning. And sorry, and I'll try to do it in between a pause, but you'll hear the 15-second warning. Okay. Jamal Cole.
Good afternoon. I was having technical difficulties. Can you please ask the question again? I just logged back on.
Yes, I can repeat the question. Please state your name, current position, why you are running, and what skills you have that would make you the best candidate.
Appreciate that. So my name is Jamal Cole. I'm the founder and CEO of a nonprofit organization called My Block, My Hood, My City. What we do is we take teenagers from the most under-resourced communities on educational field trips, and we expose them to different cultures, different professions, different cuisines. We also work with a lot of block clubs and keep them connected. The more safe you are, the more connected you are, the safer you are, the healthier you are, the happier you are. We work with hundreds of volunteers all throughout the city. We shovel snow for seniors. We put holiday lights on King Drive. We do all these things. I love working in my nonprofit organization, but I realize the problems we're facing in the 1st District in Chicago are way too big for a nonprofit organization to solve. We can pass out turkeys on Thanksgiving for the rest of our lives, but people are still hungry on the 28th, 29th, the 30th, and 31st. We can give out small business relief grants. We can help hit the hood and put out funds to reduce violence. And Memorial Day, Labor Day, we still have to do more. There's a lot more we can do. We need a partner in federal government that can work with nonprofits, cut the red tape. We need a partner in federal government that can work with activists. We shouldn't have to put our own money up to start after school programs. We shouldn't have to put our own money up to take kids on field trips. We need a partner in federal government. That's why I'm running. I'm running to represent the first district and be a partner in federal government for nonprofit organizations and activists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next candidate, Senator Jacqueline Collins.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Basically, as you know, I am the state senator, and I'm running for Congress because of the urgency of now, and the stakes are too high. We have the suppression of the voting rights. We have the rise of white supremacy, and we have an attack on our reproduction rights. My campaign is named Jackie for Justice because justice has been the foundation and the bedrock of my legislative agenda. Why am I running? I'm running to ensure that the American dream is revived, restored, and renewed, that we have access to good paying jobs, dependable and decent health care, affordable housing, safe housing, and Medicare for all. My legislative agenda, I'm not running on rhetoric. I'm running on a legislative agenda of accomplishment. I was the chief co-sponsor of raising the minimum wage, stopped all predatory lending in the state of Illinois, led nursing home reform, established the Illinois Task Force for Human Trafficking to view and investigate the disparity in the investigation of Black women and girls. I established a task
15
force.
seconds.
Well, I can mention my other legislative accomplishments as we move forward in this forum, but that's by who I am. I'm running to continue the fight on the congressional level to ensure that we dismantle the structural racist institutions that have stifled economic growth.
Thank you. Next candidate, Steve Dejoy. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, and thank you. And I'm so happy to be here today. You know, I have a long history of with Trinity, and in fact, in the 60s, I was a friend of Jeremiah Wright's, and Jeremiah would speak with my mother and Chuck Long at my house in Hyde Park. So, you know, long history with Trinity. You know, the reason I'm running is because I feel this is a moment where someone has to come together and bring our community together. And I think I possess the skill set and the relationships for the last 40 years to do that. You know, the business that I'm in is banking and professional relationships and engagement of the community. And one of the things I take the greatest pride in is knowing the resources that are needed when people call on me with issues and problems. And unfortunately, my business involves solving problems. And I hate to tell everyone that business is good because there's so many problems out here for us to solve. You know, in the last 3 weeks and 4 weeks of this campaign, I've been speaking with constituents in the first district. And as I speak with them, they've identified problems that they're facing. And as we've addressed those problems, even in the campaign, it just shows the need for someone to be present in the community who understands what people are going through every day out there. Crime, violence, people are scared to walk the streets, scared to drive to the store. And that's my mission.
Seconds.
I have a skill set to resolve those issues. And I'm looking forward to having an opportunity to present those solutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alderman Pat Dowell.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Alderman Pat Dowell. I'm Alderman of the 3rd Ward. I'm running for Congress because I believe that I have the skill sets to move a marginalized district to a better level, to a different level, a level of improvement. I've done that in the 3rd Ward, where I am the alderman of Bronzeville, South Loop, Washington Park, and Fuller Park, and in time have moved that community from a community that was marginalized to one of the fastest growing communities as identified by Crain's Chicago Business. In terms of the skills that I have to be a congressman, I'm an economic development specialist, having brought many businesses to the ward and also affordable housing. I have legislative experience, having written and passed legislation, some of which have become models for the country. I'm a consensus builder through my role as the chair of the budget committee, bringing dispersed people together to pass a budget that benefits all of Chicago. I'm a community organizer, having worked with the people in my community and investing in them and their dreams. And at the heart of the matter, I'm a social worker who has a deep care and love for the welfare of our people, for our community. And those are the skills that I will be bringing to Washington, D.C. in order to bring back resources that
15 seconds.
benefit the 1st Congressional District neighborhoods all throughout this, from the South Loop to Kankakee. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the forum.
Thank you. Next candidate, Cassandra Goodrum.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting us to have an opportunity to express our views at this forum. My name is Attorney Cassandra Goodrum, and I am running to be your next candidate for this 1st Congressional District because I have grown up right here in this city on the South Side. I attended DePaul undergrad, Northwestern University School of Law. For the last 10 years, I have worked at Chicago State University in the Department of Criminal Justice as a professor of criminal justice. Prior to that, I had a law practice that specialized in family law and in Social Security disability. And before that, I was with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. And I say all of that to say that the skills that I have honed over the years will be the things that make me the best candidate to be your next representative in Congress. I just told you I did Social Security disability and family law. That's divorce and people trying to get their disability benefits. So I'm meeting people at their lowest point and trying to help them do better. And during the course of my career working in this field, I have learned to negotiate. I have learned to navigate complex systems such as Social Security, and I have certainly learned to advocate on behalf of the people I am representing. And then take that to the next level.
15 seconds.
Thank you. I will take that to the next level as I'm going to be your representative in Congress. And I appreciate again your opportunity to express our views. Cassandra Goodrum. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, our next candidate is Jonathan Jackson, and I'm uncertain if he is with us. I don't see him. Okay, then we will move on to we'll move on to thank you, to Marcus Lewis.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcus Lewis. I'm an ordained apostolic Pentecostal minister. This is my 7th consecutive run for a seat of Congress in the state of Illinois. I believe that I am the best suited for this position because the people know that the congressional residents have been abandoned and they have been left behind. After many years of the residents never seeing a town hall meeting, after the residents never being engaged by their congressperson directly in a mass meeting to hear what they have to say. I mean, after all, the Constitution, the preamble in the Constitution says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And also it says that it is for, by, and of the people. And the issue of it is the people have been cut out of this deal. America is changing to where the issues of the Constitution have been undermined. And we can't have that. Most Congress people that go to Congress from their respective districts have been bought out, sold out. I will not do that. I will bring back civility, decency, and fairness to our district, and they will be engaged, the residents, by Marcus Lewis as your congressperson.
Thank you. And our next candidate will need to pronounce her name again. Mrs. Norrington Reeves, can you pronounce your name for me, please?
Sure, it's Norrington Reeves.
Norrington, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Karen Norrington Reeves. And to answer the question, I come to this space as a 20-year resident of the 1st Congressional District and a third-generation Chicagoan. I am actually a full-time candidate, having resigned my job as the founder and CEO of the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership, where for nearly a decade I have led workforce development for the city of Chicago and Cook County, bringing more than 100,000 jobs to residents throughout the city and the county, working with more than 2,000 employers. As I travel the district, there are two issues, primary issues, that residents share with me of greatest concern to them. The first being economic development and the second being violence. And I submit to you that my skill set in economic development and being a nationally recognized expert in workforce development helps to address that second issue of violence, and that these are the things that are most pressing for our community, and that I am the most uniquely qualified of this candidate pool to be able to address those issues for the residents of the 1st Congressional District. I come to this with a skill set as an educator, first and foremost, starting off in public education, going on to be an adjunct law professor, bringing the skills of being a bridge builder and a connector between the private sector, the public sector, and the philanthropic sector. I look forward to serving as your Congresswoman of the 1st Congressional District and fielding your questions today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next candidate, Robert Palmer. Mr. Palmer.
Hi, my name is Robert Palmer. I am a teacher with CPS, a high school teacher. I'm also a member of the Chicago Teachers Union. Congratulations to our new president-elect, Stacey Davis Gates. I am a real estate broker, and I have a history with Trinity too. I did attend for a period of time. The reason I'm running is because our neighborhoods are in crisis. The youth need more opportunity and mentorship and mentor programs. And the way things are going now with some of the people in office, if it's not working, we need to consider other things. I have a unique ability to connect with people and the youth. And I'm not afraid to go into the most dangerous situations and the most dangerous neighborhoods.
15 seconds.
Okay, I hold a master's degree in teaching from National Louis University, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next candidate, Jonathan Swain.
Good afternoon, and thank you for hosting this forum, and it's great to be with all the candidates here today. My name is Jonathan Swain. I am a candidate for Congress in the 1st Congressional District. In terms of positions, I do a number of things in and around the community. Currently, I'm the president and CEO of Lincoln Unlimited Scholars, a 50-year-old nonprofit that's helped send Black kids to college. I'm the 2nd-generation owner of a community staple, Kimbark Beverage Shop in Hyde Park. I'm also the founder and creator of an event called the Hyde Park Brew Fest, now known as Summerfest, that uses celebration as an economic engine within our community. And most recently, from a government perspective, I was a commissioner on the Chicago Board of Elections. Why am I running? Because I can look at headlines from 20 years ago talking about violence and look at the same headline just last week. And the fact is, we continue to have elections after elections and forums after forums talking about the problems. Yet, if you ask yourself, well, have they gotten any better in the past 20 years? The answer is no. And so that, to me, says that there is a void of a certain new type of leadership or a certain type of leadership that gathers people together, includes them in the process of developing solutions. Because once people are included in the solutions, they'll choose to involve themselves in the process. You can see right now that they're not. Just look at the voter turnouts within our community. And so I'm running for Congress to bring a new type of leadership to the conversation, one that includes
15 seconds.
Centers their voices in the conversation so that together we can work together to turn around the 1st Congressional District and restore it to the place of prominence it's held in this country historically. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last person for this round of questions, Charisse Williams.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the Trinity community and the organizers for hosting this forum today. My name is Charisse Williams. I am the proud mother of a 21-year-old son, junior at Morehouse College, Master's of Public Policy at University of Chicago, and I have been a community organizer for most of my professional career. I am not a politician, and I'm running because our district deserves better. We deserve quality jobs with livable wages. We deserve real criminal justice reform that actually has real impact. And we deserve to have a ease on our taxes and our pocketbooks. With my career at Illinois State Treasurer's Office, I successfully distributed $24 million in cash and unclaimed property through the state. I then successfully started a program called Hire 360 with my work at Chicago Federation of Labor, where we recruited and trained Black, Brown, and women into union apprenticeship programs, which historically have not been that most welcoming for us. And then at Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, where I served as the chief of staff, I managed a $500 million budget and successfully distributed over $1 billion in grant and funding. So I'm running because we deserve the opportunities and the access that we've historically not received. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. That is our first round of questions. And I would like to introduce again Luther Henry, Church and Society co-chair. We're going to change the order. And as a matter of fact, we're going to start with Charisse Williams. We'll go from the bottom to the top. And Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Go ahead. Luther.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Good afternoon. Yes.
Afternoon, candidates. First question, what do you feel are the most critical needs in the district, and what are you prepared to do on day one to address those needs? Candidate Charisse Williams.
Yes. So I've traveled the district and have worked in the district for quite a while. And the things that we hear the most are economic development and concern about our safety and our family. So regarding just economic development in general, we have a focus on real jobs and having workforce development and training programs. There's so much money and resources that are out there to use to give to our small businesses to make getting access to capital easier. There are, the government just passed recently a $1.3 trillion infrastructure bill. 17 million of that monies are going to the state on top of the 19 millions that the state had already released in 2019. So to be able to use that money and actually give it to the communities who need it the most. So one of the things that I initially championed when I even first announced was to design a trade campus, similar to a college campus, but really a focus on learning different trades so that someone can come in and learn to see if they want to be a brick maker or if they want to learn culinary skills while learning all the traditional skills that you learn in college, but being able to give another option for those wanting to have different educational opportunities. And two, ensuring that the money that we get, that the legislation is written correctly, that it actually goes to the communities who need it the most. Again, we've historically missed those monies. Thank you.
Sorry.
No problem.
Thank you. Same question for candidate Swain.
Could you repeat the question, please?
What do you feel are the most critical needs in the district, and what are you prepared to do on day one to address those needs?
So I think the most critical need in the district is the need for a leader that's going to listen to the people within the district. And I can tell you, having gone in and around the district, I hear three basic things. People don't feel safe. People are concerned about the cost of their food and the cost of their medicine and the cost of their gas. And then lastly, people are concerned that if they were to get sick and go to the hospital, they might get healed, but might lose their house because of the cost of their health care. Those are the three things that I hear consistently, regardless of where we are in the district. Now, with respect to the question about day one, the conversation about what are you going to do on day one is a conversation that's put before people running for office all the time. And the fact is that no matter what legislative body you're in, there are on-ramping that's going to have to be done for you to be a part of that. But having said that, there are things that can be done day one, like organizing our community, connecting with all of the leaders in our community, making sure that they understand the process of communication with our office so that we can continually hear the needs so that their needs can be heard in Washington. I think what happens with leadership oftentimes is that the leaders say, here's what we're going to do without including the people. And then you see the result. People don't show up at election time and don't show up when you need them. The first thing I'm going to do is to organize the community, make sure they know their voices are heard and they have a space inside our office so their voices can be heard in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, next candidate, Robert Palmer.
Well, as you may have known from my prior comments, the youth and some of the violence in the community are the youth are a priority in giving them opportunity, and some of the violence has to be curtailed. I, on day one, will bring a think tank together of our community and come up with ideas and strategies. There's a lot of money left on the table for our community that we are not getting. And I would assure that we will get every dollar that we have due. And but pretty much on day one, that's what I would do. We have businesses that can help mentor some of our youth as well, giving them small business loans or some type of incentives to train or teach a trade to our youth will be an important aspect
15
in giving
seconds.
them opportunity. So on day one, that's what I would do. And on day two, that's what I would do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Karen Norrington Reeves.
Thank you. The backbone of workforce development, the architecture of workforce development in this country is through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. There's literally $4.2 billion just in training funds allocated within this act. It has 5 different titles, and it encompasses not only the Department of Labor workforce development programs, but the Department of Education, as well as the Department of Human Services, Health and Human Services. And so that act is up for reauthorization. It was supposed to be done this year, but because we had these midterm elections coming up, they postponed the work on the reauthorization of that act. And the first thing that I will do is get on the Education and Labor Committee to focus on the reauthorization of that act to ensure that it is written in such a way that it allows us to actually leverage those dollars and use them in a greater degree for apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, career pathway development, career exploration for our youth, and job creation, partnering with the private sector. That's day one. The next thing I would do, that's on a federal level. On a local level, it would be a convening of our private, public, and philanthropic sectors to really begin mapping out a framework for how we make strategic investments in our districts and how we create change, lasting systemic economic change for our communities. Thank you.
And let me just ask that thank you so much. When you are not speaking, please mute. So there are a couple of our panelists who do need to mute. Thank you so much. Luther?
Thank you. Next candidate, Marcus Lewis. Same question.
Thank you, so kindly. When they speak about the day one issue, that's day one when they're taking the oath of office on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives. But there are 8 weeks between November 8th and January 3rd, 2023. I will convene town halls. The first thing after I am the congressperson elect, I will convene a massive town hall that the people who have been abandoned, who have been left out of this equation for decades, because the Congress people don't engage with the constituents. They're representing someone else after they get to Washington. They're bought out. That's why the people know that this is all a sham as far as our government is not functioning. So I will engage the most massive town hall this district has ever seen. Then the next day, I will get together with local business leaders, and I want them to put forth what they want to see happen for themselves, because I would like to institute funding for the avenues. If you go up and down 63rd Street,
15
55th,
seconds.
79th, 87th, 95th, they are ghost towns. Their businesses don't even exist. That's what I will do. Engage the public and then engage business.
Thank you. Jonathan Jackson, do we have Jonathan Jackson?
No, he's not present.
No. Okay. We'll move on then to Cassandra Goodrum.
Thank you. So my plan for the 1st Congressional District would start before day one, and it lies in the development of district clubs. And the district clubs are going to work to put the power of government back into the hands of the people where it belongs. And so the district clubs would, of course, reach out and engage all of the districts. It would be self-run within the communities, but then the communities can notify our office, the congressional office, of their needs. The congressional office can then work as a liaison and as a way of distributing all of the resources that come from Congress to our communities. And we are actually addressing the actual needs that the community has identified. In addition to that, the issues that I hear are like my colleagues have said, safety or violence, and also economics and education. And I am a proponent of day one, making sure that we can make every effort to get the Voting Rights Act adopted so that we will have equitable access to the polls all across the United States, because I think that is absolutely critical to all of the needs that are going forward.
15 seconds.
I would be looking to decriminalize cannabis and use that, the revenues from cannabis, as an economic engine in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Pat Dowell.
Yes, since this campaign began, I've been speaking to mayors across the 1st District, going door to door, talking to the residents and also business owners. And the 4 things that I hear are public safety, infrastructure, economic development, and the role of a congressman. Most people say they don't know who their congressman is and they don't know what the congressman does. So I think on day one, I am going to focus on those things. And the 3 things that I would do in the first 90 days. One, I would make sure that we go around and talk to all the residents in the community to basically educate them about the role of the congressman's office, who their congressman is, the staff, who they call, and that sort of thing. Number 2, I would put myself in position to make sure that I'm assigned to the committees that are going to deliver the most for the people in the 1st Congressional District based on the information that I've already garnered. The Energy Committee, the Transportation Committee, the Small Business Development Committee. And then 3, I would begin to comb those various agencies that deal with those issue areas, to find out where there may be grant programs, resources, and other money that we're not tapping now to bring that back into the 1st Congressional District. I think that, as someone said, there'll be a lot of onboarding, but there's certainly things that can be done starting June 29th. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Dejoy.
Well, I think in my case, my day one didn't start 30 or 60 days ago when this campaign started. My day one started almost 4 decades ago you know, as I experienced so much in the city in business and in community development. You know, I think what's missing in our district is an understanding of where people are and the struggles that they're experiencing. And I think I'm well suited to be the voice of that message. You know, Jamal said something and it sticks with me because for the last 4 decades, I've been showing up wherever there's an issue in our community and someone who has a problem and where we can make a solution through working together. You know, my greatest strength is the ability to bring people together. And so just last Saturday, I was at the South Shore Summit, Community Summit, and there people shared the development vision for South Shore. But what was absent was many of the stakeholders that should have been there in this campaign, for one. Secondly, the voices of the people are speaking so loudly that we need to be participants in what's going on in the government. And that's what I plan to do day one, is to continue the work that I've been doing for violence interruption, for youth mentoring, helping those that are suffering from mental illness. And those are the issues that are critical right now. So day one for me started a long time ago. So this would just be a continuation of the work that I believe in and have made my life's work.
Thank you. Senator Jacqueline Collins.
Thank you. And like Mr. Dejoy, I will continue the work that I've already established in the Illinois General Assembly by making families feel safe in their homes and the schools and their community by stopping the proliferation of guns. One of the issues I will take on is common sense gun laws. And just last week or this week, the governor signed the first legislation in the Midwest banning ghost guns, which was my legislation. I would like to also see gun violence designated as a public health crisis to ensure that we have the funding to go and the resources to stop the dismantling and the destruction of our families and our youth that become victims of gun violence. So I think with declaring it as a public health crisis, we'll ensure that we get the resources for mental health treatment, as well as for victim assistance and the youth programming that we need. We cannot go back to the failed policies of the past of incarceration and lock them up and throw away the key. We have to put more, we have to be smart on crime. And that was an issue, many people concerned about their safety. The other thing I was fight to raise the federal minimum wage as we've done in the state. I would also codify Roe versus Wade to ensure that all women across the board have the right to make the decisions about their reproductive health care. Those are just some of the issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamal Cole. Do we have Jamal Cole still on?
No, I don't see him.
Okay, moving on. Do we get Pastor Chris Butler?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So we have the first question, what is the number one problem in the district? And I think that the number one problem that we're facing in the 1st Congressional District is that all of our citizens are living in a rigged system. It's economically rigged, it's socially rigged. And so when you think about day one, there are 2 things that are going to happen, one at the local level, one in Congress. The first thing is in Congress, the first thing that folks are going to do is vote on leadership. We actually need somebody to go to Congress who's not going to just fall in line on a leadership vote, but make sure that we vote for somebody in leadership, whether the Democrats are in the majority or the minority. We need somebody in leadership who will not continue to sell out to corporate interest in these United States. We have to stand up to those corporate interests if we're going to rebalance our economy in favor of working families. The second thing that I'll do is to put online the project that we've been working on with Stanford University, where we do deliberative polling. One of the things that I learned as a community organizer working on parent engagement in public schools is that when you have a community meeting 6 o'clock at night, most of the parents are not going to be there. You'll have professional folks there who work in schools and education. parents are at home doing homework, doing laundry, many of them on their way to their second job. Deliberative polling will enable us to have representative samples with folks all over the district, from every corner of this district, from every walk of life in this district, and make sure that we're actually hearing from the people.
Thank you. I apologize, I didn't give you the warning.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did get a message. Did we hear from candidate Karen Norrington Reeves?
Yes, you did. I talked about job creation. Yes, you did.
Yes.
Apologies, I got a note. I was looking at a note. Apologies there.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Kirby Brigham.
I want to first thank you for that question. I want to say that first, my campaign is a human rights campaign because we see these issues as human rights issues. The first thing, going across this district, talking to constituents, what we saw is that there's a new conscience of voters in this district, and they are demanding three things that I saw, which one is education. And so how I plan to fix that is by first joining the House in Education Labor. I feel like that is the first key component to getting those trade schools into our schools, is by working with different unions. The second thing is gun violence. The first thing we want to do is repeal the liability shield for gun manufacturers. We see that they are the only industry in America that is exempt from being sued. We want to pass a universal background check, and the gun show loopholes and expand background checks. I believe working with city, state elected officials will be crucial to combating gun violence. Another one is economic justice. One of the things that I say that we can do to fix those is seeing housing as a human right. We can also forgive student loan debt. We saw that if we want to push the Black wealth gap up, that is one way to do it. We see that 85% of Black students take on more debt than white counterparts, and just relieving $50,000 in that debt will push the Black wealth gap up by 40%. And so if we're talking about truly bringing economic stability into the district, these are the things that we need to tackle.
Thank you.
Thank you, candidates.
Next, I'd like to call on our Michelle Mcgee, former Vice Chair of Church and Society. Michelle?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all the candidates for the work you are doing, the boots on the ground. I'm going to start in the middle, work my way down through the candidates, and then come back up from the top. So just hang on to your seats. So Javette, we're going to give them 90 seconds or 60 on this one?
90 on all remaining questions.
Okay, so be careful, everyone. Listen to the question, answer the question. Do you agree that the U.S. should give billions of dollars to global efforts if its own people aren't thriving, that are living and working, that have poor living and working conditions? I'll read that again. Do you agree that the U.S. should give billions of dollars to global effort if its own people aren't thriving with poor living and working conditions? We're going to start with Alderwoman Pat Dowell.
Thank you for that question, Ms. Mcgee. Yes, I think the United States, to use a saying, can chew and chew bubble gum and walk at the same time. I think that applies here. I'll take the example of Ukraine. I think it's very important that the United States keeps its commitment to Ukraine by providing medical attention, military attention, and humanitarian aid. But at the same time, we can focus on the United States and the problems that we have in the United States by having the political will to address some of the issues that we have in our country. That may mean changing budget priorities, putting more money, for example, in the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or putting more money in our healthcare system. We can do this. I mean, the United States is not a poor country. We have the resources and the means, we just don't have the political will. I think by not investing in some of these third world countries and in places like Ukraine, we make the whole world unstable.
15 seconds.
Which in the end has a negative impact on the country. So I think that we should invest in these other areas, and we just need to find the political will and work hard and have people in government who can make that happen. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Attorney Cassandra Goodrum.
Thank you for that question. While I agree that we should offer some aid, some humanitarian aid to the Ukraine at this time, I am not at all convinced that we can chew bubblegum and walk at the same time in this country. In light of the fact that Roe versus Wade has now, we have this leaked, the leak from the Supreme Court as to what their decision might be. Why didn't Congress step up 2 years ago when Texas decided to abolish abortion laws and try to codify Roe versus Wade then? And at the same time, as we're sending these billions of dollars to the Ukraine, we are having a shortage of what? Baby formula of all things? No, we are not taking care of our people. So humanitarian aid going overseas is fine, but until we can show that we can take care of our people right here, I see the need on a global level to make sure that we can help the Ukraine, but at the same, you cannot do it at the expense of the people here in our country. As we are sending billions of dollars, inflation continues to rise and rise and rise. We are the ones suffering now. So I think we need to balance that a little bit better at this time. We cannot.
15 seconds.
We still have to be engaged, educated, and empowered right here in our country before we can send as much aid as we have so far to the issue in Ukraine. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Pastor Marcus Lewis.
The answer is no. My book, Charity Begins at Home. And that's what we haven't been getting enough of. And the constituency of the 1st Congressional District has been addressing to me just that fact. They just gave $40 billion to Ukraine. Okay. And they had an advertising campaign on how diligent Ukrainians are to fight for their country against the Russians. But the issue of it is that's media. We don't know what's going on other than there's a war. But there's also a war going on in the streets of the 1st Congressional District. And that's not been addressed at all, and the people know it. You need a congressperson who, first of all, will remind them that government is not an appendage for business. Business has their role, but so does the government. The government is here to look out for the constituents of its citizenry, and they're not doing that. That's why I'm running. It's enough of the nonsense, because if that would be the case, the Congress people that are in office right now would still be there. They know they're going to be run out come November. 32 Democrats have already just said, I'm done, quitting, because they know that they haven't done their job. Their agenda has been perverse.
15
and we
seconds.
need something to bring it back into balance. Charity begins at home.
Okay. Next, we'll have Karen Norrington Reeves.
I struggle with this issue because we in the United States often come to international issues as though we have some moral authority, when the reality is that we have perpetrated so many horrors and injustices against our own people, particularly those of color. And so when I look at the aid to Ukraine, I certainly recognize and understand the need to ensure that we're helping to ensure that there's no nuclear war, right, that grows out of that particular conflict or any of the others. By the same token, as a person of Haitian descent, as the adoptive mother of a Haitian child, where is the aid to Haiti? Where's the aid to countries with Black people? And so I really struggle with this. I do recognize, however, that we have billions and billions and billions of dollars that we invest in our own economy. I do think that there's a need to ensure that there's world stability and that we are not helping to feed regimes that ultimately will help dominate the world and or create nuclear proliferation. But I really struggle with the notion that we can give billions of dollars to folks abroad when we can't address structural racism, when we can't create equity in terms of access to healthcare or access to education or any of those things. So I struggle with this question. I struggle with the notion that we as a nation can invest elsewhere before we invest here first.
Thank you. Mr. Robert Palmer.
Thank you for that question. I think that we can do both, but you need to take care of home first. And with all the things that are going on, not only in the 1st Congressional District, but in Black communities across the country, we need to take care of that first. Now, as far as Ukraine, the Ukrainian president kind of reminds me of myself. He speaks his mind to power. He stands up for what he feels is right. So in that regard, I think we have that part in common. I do think that Haitians and Africans need to be treated fairly and with parity, because even in what was reported that Haitians and Nigerians or Africans, and even in leaving Ukraine, had to take a back seat to others that was leaving. And if you look at during the Clinton administration, Rwanda was that was a disaster. So if you're going to do things, you got to do it across the board with fairness to people of color, but you have to take care of home first. It's no reason that our children in our communities do not have the same opportunity as the children.
And Mr. Palmer, I'm sorry, your time is up. I apologize, I was on mute.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Jonathan Swain.
Could you repeat the question again, please?
Do you agree that the U.S. should give billions of dollars to global efforts if its own people aren't thriving with poor living and working conditions?
So I think the answer, it's both and. We have to do both as a country. We are operating in a geopolitical chessboard today, the likes of which we have not seen since probably the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so we have to think about what our role is in this geopolitical world. In fact, keeping Russia in check, keeping China in check is important to us at home in a different way, because the nature of warfare is different. It's not about tanks and guns as much as it is about cyber warfare. So we need to think about keeping them in check so it does not have an impact on things that matter to us at home, like our electrical grid and our water systems. Having said that, the federal government is a level of government that can spend money it doesn't have. And so the choices about where it spends money is a function of its values, and those values are driven by a political system. So for me, everything comes back to this question of voting rights. The fact is that the decisions that are being made within our country about where our dollars come from are being driven by the political system and the political leaders that don't necessarily reflect the personal feelings of the American public. So we have to go back to establishing voting rights, protecting voting rights, so that the state legislatures can reflect the will of the people, that lines will not be gerrymandered, so that we can get our voices on the ground level up through the state legislatures up to Congress, so that our congressional leadership can pass budgets that are more reflective of the positions and feelings of the American people, which would be more of a both and equitably to all people. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Charisse Williams.
Yes, thank you. I'll say this, that representation matters. And if we follow the money, we know that over $738 billion are just in the federal defense budget alone. Since 2020, Africa has only gotten 8.5 billion and Haitians only got 4.5 billion since 2010. In short, yes, we need to help Ukraine and other countries because on a global scale, we are a global force. But the larger answer is we have to be equitable about it. We have to look at where our priorities are at. $738 billion in one budget, and they have no oversight on how the money is spent. Can we take that money and give it to our country or to our communities in our district? Yes. That's what we should be doing. We need to have a global impact, but while we're helping Ukraine, which we need to, we also need to help our other continents. We need to help Africa. We need to help Haiti. We need to have the same level of investment that we have for countries like Ukraine, that we have for other countries that look more like us. And if we don't have that level of equity, then the issue that we're trying to prevent from Ukraine can happen anywhere throughout the world.
15 seconds.
Yeah. So the monies that the federal defense budget has, we can use that money and have it and give it out more equitable for our other countries and our other communities throughout the world. And that's something that we should do. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to start at the top of the list, Mr. Kirby Brigham.
I want to thank you for this question. I believe that this question hits the reason why this election is important. The one thing that I think about when I'm hearing this question is the most important portion is the people that we elect. When we're talking about electing a progressive candidate that is one to go and tackle the filibuster, that is prohibiting policies that are that will help bring upper mobility into our communities. The first thing we need to do is we need to pass the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We need to pass the For the People Act. These are policies that is going to push our generation and voters to vote and give them that cushion that they need. Another thing too, for me, protecting them, when we're talking about this particular question, we're talking about protecting democracy. That's what the Ukrainians are fighting for. They're fighting for a better democracy, something that we have. And so when we're talking about all of global efforts, we need to make sure that not only are those global efforts going to Ukraine, I believe that they should go to people, countries that look like
15
us.
seconds.
Those countries that Trump called S-hole countries, those countries that we saw the people that look like us that was getting whipped across the border on white officers on horses. Those are the people that we need to help as well.
And I remind all of the candidates, even if you're quoting someone, we must have language that is favorable to all ears. And I'll leave it at that. So the next candidate to answer, please, Mr. Pastor Chris Butler. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What an important question. If we are not thriving at home, should we be spending this much money abroad? My answer is outrightly no. That doesn't mean that we should not spend money abroad, but we shouldn't do it when we are not thriving at home. Another question, though, I think is why we are in this situation where we are spending money, lots of money in the Ukraine, and we are not thriving at home. And I think that's because there is this bipartisan consensus to do nothing. A lot of the people who are invested in this Ukrainian effort, these are institutions, not working families, and we need leaders who are going to be focused on 100% on working families. Absolutely, we have humanitarian crises in Haiti. What about the brown people who are all over our TVs in Afghanistan? These are humanitarian crises that we help to create. But too many times, those in Congress who advocate or supposedly advocate for working families, for working people, Black and brown people all over the globe, we see folks say it with their words, but when it comes to the vote, Congress has the power of the purse. When it comes to the vote, we don't stand up on the leadership vote. We don't stand up on these appropriation votes. And we need leaders in Congress who won't let these institutional things like the infrastructure bill go by before we take care of working families and put monies directly into our pockets.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Senator Jacqueline Collins.
Thank you. Like Barbara Jordan said, what we want is an America as good as its promise. So the promise that America, the rhetoric they're articulating in reference to the Ukraine incidents and the events, is hypocritical for us to go and preach democracy, that we're fighting for democracy, when we're suppressing the vote here in the United States. The bedrock of our democracy has been dismantled state by state by the suppression of the voting rights. We have spent over $54 billion to help Ukraine, while 3 out of 5 children go to bed hungry at night. Poverty is on the rise in the United States. And we should look at our budgets as moral documents, as Dr. King would say. And I, like Dr. King, believe that we should have the audacity to believe that people everywhere deserve 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their mind, dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. That means that in our budgets, we give that priority. We take care of what's necessary here to ensure that our children have hope and opportunities. Yes, I believe that we should look at home first. The problems that are arising now in the geopolitical arena of our own creation at the border, southern border in Afghanistan and Ukraine. America is seeing what they have done over the years, and it's coming back to haunt us.
Thank you. Before we proceed with our last candidate, I want to remind everyone that the Q&A nor the chat is being monitored. So if you have, we have all the questions that we need. This is just taking information in, and you can always contact the candidates through their various platforms. Last but not least, brother, Mr. Stevens, say the last name for me.
You actually, I'm so glad to hear Haiti being mentioned by all of the candidates. And so to all of my Haitian folks out there, je suis content de vous voir and sac passé. But I say this, we have an obligation to provide humanitarian aid to the Ukraine. But it's also an illustration of the American hypocrisy that, as Jackie Collins just said, that we fight overseas and spend billions of dollars overseas to fight for freedom, but yet we don't have the freedom and the right to vote here in our own country. Also, as we give billions of dollars, and I see billions of dollars with a B bantered around, and as a banker, I say $1 billion, that's a lot of money, and millions of dollars. And if that money was put to work in the 1st Congressional District and the South Side of Chicago and communities across the United States, you would see major differences in the homeless situation. I travel throughout this city, and I've worked with the homeless for the last 20 years. And I can tell you, there should not be the homeless camp at Roosevelt Road and the Dan Ryan under the 22nd Street Viaduct and viaducts across our city and all across our country. So to answer the question, quite frankly, yes, we should be giving due support to Ukraine, but that money should be feeding families here in America. The food pantries and the food lines that we see and gas lines, those have become regular activities in our community. And if we've got money to spend in Ukraine, we should have money to spend in the United States, and certainly in the 1st Congressional District.
Thank you so much. Please stand by before we proceed. Please stand by.
And so now let me ask Dr. Neva Lubin-Johnson to begin her questioning. Dr. Lubin-Johnson?
We can't hear you, Dr. Johnson.
There we go. As usual, it's 2022 and still the mute button was on. Okay. Good afternoon once again to all the candidates, and thank you for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. I do have a question for you. As was stated earlier, you will have 90 seconds to respond to the question. And so with that, the question is, would you publicly advocate for reparations for Native Black Americans, descendants of the transatlantic slave trade, in the form of lump sum payments or tax exemptions or free health care and education, or any or all of these? You have 90 seconds to respond, and I will start with Pastor Chris Butler. Pastor Butler. Thank you.
In a word, yes. I think it's very important that we advocate publicly for reparations for descendants of Native African Americans, formerly enslaved people on these United States. There's actually great precedent in the United States history for providing reparations for folks who have been systemically disenfranchised by the United States government. I think that it's so important that the advocates for reparations have a language that we're able to speak for people outside of our community, beyond our political groups. As a person who pastors in the Assembly of God, which is a fairly conservative denomination, I've made great progress talking to fellow clergy and fellow members of my denomination about why this is important, not just for Black people, but for the United States of America. When we lift up Black people, we're going to lift up the whole United States of America. And people are coming around to that as we communicate on the basis of compassion, love, and unity. While we're at it, we need to be advocating for regular payments in the form of basic income. We need to be advocating for free at the point of access healthcare for all Americans. We need to be advocating for free access to education from preschool all the way through college for all Americans. And yes, there needs to be a special effort made toward reparations for descendants of formerly enslaved people.
Thank you. Has Jamal Cole made it back on?
I understand that Jonathan Jackson is now on.
Okay, he will be after Cassandra Goodrum.
That's correct.
For this question. All right, thank you. Okay, next person, if Jamal Cole is not on, then will be Senator Collins. Senator Collins, thank you.
Yes, I'm definitely supportive of moving and pushing the envelope on reparations. Now, I can't remember all the categories. I would say I agree with all the above. I just can't remember all of them. I think we have to look at across the board where they would be more beneficial or most beneficial, and wherever those areas of lack and lack of equity, I think that's where the monies and the resources should be paid. I would want it to go where we would have the most impact, be more effective in an expeditious way, because we know the people are hurting, the people are in pain, and we're suffering decades and decades and decades of disinvestment besides the 400 years of slavery. So I would definitely be pushing and looking and researching, looking at our major institutions to do the research on where the money could be best applied, but definitely all those fronts pushing for reparations.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator Collins. And I put in the chat just those topics in the question, but also if you have any other suggestions that aren't in there, I did say any or all. So just because it is a long question and a lot of options. All right. Thank you for your response, Senator Collins, along with Pastor Butler. Next, we have Steve Dejoy.
say thank you, Dr. Newman, and it's so good to be here with you today, Doc. You know, we met some 40 years ago when we started the Metropolitan Urban League Board, and you were a fantastic force there. But I believe reparations is a critical necessity for the Black community, but it has to be targeted. You know, education being funded for vocational training for our youth, or movement into four-year institutions for college, I think is a critical aspect of it. But in terms of wealth building, you know, I recently participated in the Evanston Reparations event. And what we found is that out of the criteria for reparations in Evanston was that you have to have lived in Evanston between 1930 and 1972 and verify your ethnicity, which generally, if you can think about it, is almost an impossibility for so many people. So education, funding of Black business, the resurgence of Black banks that are actually dedicated to serving the Black community, I think is where our reparations effort should lie. You know, not all people in our community want to buy a house, and that's okay. So when you mentioned those four categories, I think we should fund all of them. But the most important thing we need to understand is that there's a deficiency in the playing field that we've been forced to work through for the last 200 years. And that
15 seconds.
Keep going.
Oh, I still have more time?
15 seconds.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll just close with this. Student loan debt is affecting Black students across the country, and it's devastating to the opportunity for them to make purchases of homes and loans. So the first thing to repair our community is to void the student loan debt of the Black youth and the Black student.
Thank you. Next will be Alderman Pat Dow.
And remember, you'll be hearing my voice, and I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I do need to give you the timing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. I believe that reparations is long overdue and necessary to Black people to repair all the damage that has been done to our community over decades and centuries. I support all of the ideas that you have listed here, Dr. Lubin. I would add also having investments in small business development, making sure even in large scale businesses that may be cutting edge, like new manufacturing companies or cybersecurity, electric vehicles, and other businesses that have a impact should be provided money for African Americans to run, so we can hire people on a large scale within our community. I think that it has taken much too long for us to have this conversation, and we need to push forward with that and make it real for our folks who are hurting. Instead of tax exemptions, I actually would call for
15 seconds
tax relief, where people don't have to pay any taxes. African Americans don't have to pay any taxes for some period of time. But I think there needs to be some more research and some more discussion with our community to determine what that set of package or set of elements should be. Thank you.
Let me just, excuse me, Dr. Lubin, let me remind the panelists to please do not participate in the chat. Your questions and answers are oral, so please do not make comments in regards to the other panelists in the chat. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Dr. Lubin.
Thank you. Next on the list is Cassandra Goodrum.
Thank you for that question. Our people are absolutely owed reparations, and it's actually a large part of my platform. I believe not only are we owed reparations, but the way for us to obtain them most quickly is that we decriminalize cannabis and then use a 13% portion of that, the sales, the revenue from cannabis toward our reparations. And I'm saying that, and that's just part of it, but at least that way we know we can start to create a fund where we can actually get cash reparations for descendants of chattel slaves. In addition to that, I think we should also be allowed free education, and that can be from kindergarten all the way through college or grad school or trade school. And in addition to that, I also believe we should, in some way, in some form, have a piece of property or have access to property as part of reparations for our people so that we can have that lasting generational wealth that is so prominent here in America, every place except for in our community. So in answer to your question, yes, I think all of these avenues ought to be addressed for reparations. And once we have decriminalized cannabis, which
15 seconds
on our community, I think now this is the way that cannabis can be used in a positive manner so that we go ahead and get the reparations that we are absolutely due.
Thank you. Next is Jonathan Jackson. I will repeat the question because we were in the process of it being answered when you came on. Will you publicly advocate for reparations for Native, Black Americans, descendants of the transatlantic slave trade in the form of lump sum payments or tax exemptions or free healthcare or education or any or all of these or something else? Thank you. And you have 90 seconds to respond.
Thank you. I would lead with something else. I think, first of all, we have to have a generation of financial institutions that are made available. We have to think about what makes African Americans poor. It's the institutions that historically and consistently still pickpocket African Americans, such as overdraft fees and all these fees and the lack of access to capital. So it happened very much in the mortgage market, where what is subprime? Subprime is paying 3 percentage points, 300 basis points over prime. We were overcharged. African Americans, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, their Red Book report had higher credit scores, same income, and still paid more for money to receive less. That was subprime mortgage in its infancy, and we still have that institution in place. And what was proven as an effective solution is when African Americans were able to credit qualify and teach African Americans, they lent to one another more fairly. This is in a paper that our former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan had spoken about. So we need to have access to financial institutions so we're not consistently overcharged and pickpocket. The second thing I would tell you is that let's look and see what happened in India. In one generation,
15
through technology
seconds.
and other things, they brought themselves out of poverty. They had a caste system, and in turn, they created an affirmative action where they let their children into school. We need to revisit affirmative action to get into all forms of businesses and higher education.
Thank you. Next is Marcus Lewis.
This is one of the top priorities of my campaign is reparations. And we don't need any more studies because the issue of reparations is well known amongst the Japanese and those that are Jewish descent in other countries. We need reparation payments to go directly, not only to descendants of slaves, but the progeny of those that received no legacy, had no legacy to hand down from one generation to another. They handed only their own poverty, which was nothing. I am not for setting up any type of accounts for buying of lands or whatever the case may be. The people need money. They need a check. Just like Martin Luther King said in his 63 speech that the federal government had defaulted on a check and it came back insufficient funds. We need reparations and we need it fully. If we can give 40 billion out of nowhere to Ukraine, we can give 40 billion to the first congressional descendants of slavery and the progeny of slavery right here in Illinois. I am for representing the people of Illinois. I'm not here to represent investment banks. I'm not here to go to Washington to do anything other than to be the best representative for the first congressional district residents here in this district.
Thank you. Next is Karen Norrington Reeves.
Thank you. So I unequivocally agree that reparations are critical to bridge the racial wealth gap in this country, and that the vestiges of slavery and the residue of slavery resonate throughout all of our communities, and we have to have reparations in order to address that. I support many of the different items that you articulated in the question. However, when I think about a lump sum payment, I want something that is lasting for our communities, that helps to create systemic change, that helps to create generational growth over time. So a lump sum payment in and of itself could disappear within a matter of years. I want something that is lasting, deep, and abiding for us as a community.
Meaning people don't
The
give them
idea of,
up.
can you all mute, please? The tax exemptions, access to healthcare, access to education, that is lasting and has generational impact. So because we had a generational harm that was visited upon us, whatever the solution is in the form of reparations needs to be generational in nature, so that we are seeing that growth and impact for our generations to come, so that we actually create long-term lasting change for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Robert Palmer. But before he responds, I'd like to remind the candidates, and some may have come on after we started, that we are requesting that you keep your video on during the whole time of this forum. Thank you. Mr. Palmer?
Yes, first I'd like to say I agree with Bill HR 40, but we need a stronger reparations bill, and we need it pushed through Congress. As far as education is something that should be given the Blacks. Not only would it help the tax base, but you'll have a better educated society, and that would help to eliminate crime. Jails are something that people invest in, and they look forward to having Black inmates, and that is unfortunate. As far as worldwide, you can see that not only Japanese descendants, but Jewish descendants, they're getting their reparations. Now, whether we were offered 40 acres and a mule, or Andrew Johnson kicked that to the curb, we need reparations now.
15 seconds.
We built this land, and we were slaves, and Harvard and Evanston, that is not enough what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Jonathan Swain?
Yes, so the short answer is yes. In all accounts and all of those issues that were laid out in the chat. But I like to get down to practicality because I like producing results. The fact is that in order for this to happen, you need a vote in the Congress, both in the House and the Senate, to get it passed. And if you look at the House and Senate, HR 40 was first introduced in 1988 by John Conyers. It just got past committee in April of 2021. In order for reparations to be achieved, we have to start participating at the local levels when it comes to our elections. We have to protect our voting rights through the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. That's where the battle of reparations ultimately is fought, because as we increase our participation on the local levels, then that impacts what happens in state legislatures, which ultimately impacts what happens in apportionment and allows us to draw lines that are fairer to make sure that our politics on the state level are not as wedged and divided as the populace as it should be based on the opinions of those people that live in those particular areas. So yes, I'm all for reparations, but practically it starts with us getting involved with voting. And that's why I go back to this point about our leadership has to include people and their thoughts and their ideas in the creation of policy, because as we listen to people and center their voices, people will then begin to get more involved in the process. And ultimately, that will begin to stir the tide that can get us reparations on the federal level. It all starts with voting on the local level on the way up. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. Charisse Williams?
Yes, thank you. As has been stated, HR 40 has just recently been moved out into committee. And I do wholly believe in reparations and the suggestions that have been put forth. But first, I think we need to start off with a formal apology. They need to acknowledge and apologize for the historic injustice that's happened. In addition to the funding, we should get land. So establishing a land trust. Land is one of the commodities that there will never be more of. Land is what we're owed. In addition to that, increase accesses to our HBCUs. So strengthening our HBCU programs so that our students can go to the HBCUs for free to increase our education, and providing more funding for Black agencies, for our Black advertisers, for our Black media, for our Black press, and establishing Black-owned banking. I mean, these are all suggestions, as has been referenced, that have already been thoroughly researched. I encourage people to look at the National African American Reparations Committee. It's a study that's happened where they lay out 10 suggestions on how this could be implemented. I know with the movement of this bill, I believe that there is a will in our country to have a form of reparations, and the studying and the discussions have been long and overdue. We are just due for actually implementing the policies and the suggestions that have already been created with the people across the country. So those are my, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Kirby Brigham.
I want to thank you for that question. I believe that reparation is connected to Black wealth gap. I also believe that my answer to this question would be a yes. I believe that African Americans and descendants of slaves are due justice. Although we did see that Bill Clinton did apologize for slavery in 1998, but we need an atonement in the form of a federal reparation. I do believe that we do need to work with African Americans across this nation to see what that federal atonement of reparations should look like. But when we're talking about adding education and healthcare, those are given to us under the Constitution. When they're talking about supporting the general welfare, that's what's given in the Constitution. When they're saying support the general welfare, they're saying support healthcare that works for all people. They're saying giving us an education that does not leave kids behind. And we also need an unapologetic progressive that is going to stand in the House of Congress and demand that we give reparations for those descendants of slaves and of African descent. And I'm here to do that job. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all the candidates for your responses. Dr. Orgain.
Thank you. Our next moderator will be Church and Society Ministry Chaplain, Linda Knowles Franklin. Linda.
Good afternoon, and thank you to each of the candidates. What is your position on term limit? Would it be by age, number of years, or both? An example, the president can only serve 2 terms. You have 90 seconds to respond. We're going to start with Cassandra Goodrum.
And let me just
for that question. Yes.
Let me just make one correction. Should it be by number of terms? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Could you just repeat the question so we're clear?
Sure.
Yes.
What is your position on term limits? Should it be by number of terms, age, or both?
Okay. I would definitely be in favor of term limits and by number of terms, not by age, as we can grow wiser as we become more seasoned. Also, I believe it should be by term limits because, as has already been alluded to, we know that it takes a minute to get the power that you need to get things done within Congress, whether it is forming lasting relationships where you can go across the aisle and work within your party or work with the committees that you are assigned to. So term limits, I can see a definite benefit and I can see why we would need multiple terms in order to be effective in Congress. And I look at the framers of our Constitution, and they put that 2 years in there, and they had something in mind. They wanted to be able to reflect the changes that are going on within our communities. You see the age at which you can start, 25. So that gives you a full lifetime to be a statesman, and it doesn't have to be in the same position all the time. We can continue to serve our communities no matter what age we are, and no matter what brings us to that issue of service.
Thank you. Next candidate would be Jonathan Jackson.
I believe he has signed off.
Thank you. Pastor Marcus Lewis.
Thank you very kindly. Neither. We don't need term limits at all. It's called an election. The issue is that you have to have people that are willing to galvanize the constituents. See, you need from the ground up, you need a groundswell. You need a representative that will absolutely represent the people, to absolutely connect with them, that they will be your voice. You can say, look here, look behind me. I've got 30,000 people. Look behind me. I've got 10,000 people. They want thus and so to be done. You need term limits. It's called an election. Election will term limit any person that's in office. If you have term limits, all you'll get is the same ilk that you had that was before, because they're working off an agenda. I'm not going to Washington to join an agenda. I'm going to Washington to represent the 1st Congressional District constituency. And so they would want me there. You look at the people that have been there 30, 40 years. They're now leaving. What have they done? And the constituents don't even know who they are. You need a representative that will connect with the constituency, who will say, oh, absolutely, we must keep Marcus Lewis in office because he represents our interests,
15 seconds.
not someone else's interests.
Okay, thank you. Our next candidate is Karen Norrington Reeves.
Thank you. So certainly the Constitution provided for term limits with respect to the presidency, but there were no term limits provided with respect to Congress, and the election was meant to be a check on that. I personally believe in term limits, but I also recognize the fact that you have to have time to actually learn the job. You have to have time to actually be effective, and that progress takes time. And it doesn't mean that within one term, you will be able to have effectuated the significant change that you may be seeking or that the community may want from you. And so I don't think it should be adjusted by age. I want to make one comment also with respect to age. I've got a 75-year-old mother who runs a social networking program for seniors, who is incredibly active, who still teaches classes. And so I don't think age should dictate when we decide that people have value or don't have value. That being said, I do think if we are going to advocate for term limits, that it really needs to be around the number of years of service. But again, it's up to the people to make that determination. When they're tired of electing the same people, they will stop electing those individuals. Thank you.
Thank you. The next candidate is Robert Palmer.
Thank you. I think that there should be term limits. The president can only serve 2 terms. I might want to increase that to 3 terms. But as far as voter suppression or co-opting of individuals that get in office, that makes it bad for the community when you got people in office, say for instance, Daley through co-opting of his aldermen or other individuals would put together almost like a machine and they can knock people off to the voter rolls in the Black community, or the people that support him will keep him in office. And I say that about Daley. I took the fire department exam and passed it, and passed the physical, and was never hired because of racial discrimination. So term limits, I think it has positive value. I wouldn't go by age, because like Cassandra said, you can be more seasoned, but I might
15 seconds.
I might increase it to 3 terms. And I know that we had the Ways and Means chairman from Chicago, but hey, it is what it is if you lose the election. So thank you.
Next candidate, thank you. Our next candidate is Jonathan Swain.
Thank you. So term limits, as well-intentioned as they may be, will not work without lobbying reform, and will not work without campaign finance reform. Just look at Michigan.
One second, Mr. Swain. One second. I just want to make sure. There we go.
Oh,
now you can continue. Thank you.
Can I start over again?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, great. So term limits, as well-intentioned as they may be, will not work if they're not accompanied with lobbying reform and campaign finance reform. Just look at Michigan. Michigan has significant term limits for their state legislature. And you talk to anyone up there and they'll say that the lobbyists are the ones that control the House, because they are the ones that are consistently there. And even if you had some lobbying reform, if lobbyists has the ability to put anybody in office they want to put in office, you'll have the same thing again. So you have to have a campaign finance reform, in particular, I think public funding of campaigns. So those two, lobbying reform, public financing of campaigns, having both of those, then I think term limits actually work. But the fact is true. Elections should be the check on people being there too long. And the fact is, when you look at Democratic primaries in particular and municipal elections, people are being elected with anywhere between 15 to 30% of the vote. That's 3 out of 10 people are showing up to elections. If we were able to move that to 60 to 70%, I would assure you that a lot of people that have been in office for numbers of years probably wouldn't be. And so I think, again, it goes back to involving people in our conversation, getting them involved in the process so they feel like they're heard and they're seen and that they matter, so that as they participate, a lot of the issues that we're concerned when it comes to term limits and trying to institute them will go away, because we're able to vote people out of office who are not responsive to our needs and not accountable to the people. Thank you.
Yes, our next candidate is Ms. Charisse Williams.
Thank you for this question. At its core, do I wait for my face to show, or?
Yes, give us a minute.
Okay.
There we go.
Got it. Thank you. At its core, I understand the conversation around term limits. I agree that elections serve as the end of a term. What I do believe in is succession planning. I think the reason why we're having these conversations is because there are individuals who stay in office far beyond their time, and a way to combat that is the conversation around having voting people out, right? Or having them in their term. I think the conversation needs to change more about succession to ensure that while you're in there, you're building someone to take your place. How the federal government is set up is that you need to be in there for a while to get the power that is bestowed upon the different congressmen, right? So that you can chair some of these higher influence committees. That's how it's set up. So you need to be able to have the longevity to stay in there for a while. You may need to stay in there 10 years and 20 years. And I think that's why that conversation around age happens too, so that someone has the vitality to stay a while. But it's important to have a plan so that when your time is up or when you've accomplished what you need to accomplish, you have someone to come in behind you. So I think elections serve as the term, but I think we need to have the conversation around succession the minute that you get into office.
Okay, thank you. Our next candidate is Kirby Brigham.
That's Kirby Bergens.
Bergens, pardon me.
So my answer to this question would be most certainly yes. That's one of the things that my campaign is talking about that other candidates are not, is term limits. In 1947, we saw that Congress came together to make sure that they put a check and balance on our president. They were saying that too much power for one person will put a threat on our freedom. I believe the same thing is with congressional leaders. One thing that I do believe that most certainly that having term limits reduce corporate influence, and it also push more for innovation when it comes down to our elected officials. I don't believe that we should have a succession plan because those things create a minority, and we're not in the minority. And so with me, I most certainly believe that yes, term limits should be, and I believe that it should be in the limit of the time that you're in Congress.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Pastor Chris Butler.
Thank you so much for the question. This is one of the things that I passionately believe in. You see, we are living in a rigged system. When I think about this question, I think about the hundreds of conversations that I've had with young people as a board member at the Make for Challenge, when I was organizing Rock the Vote, when I was organizing Youth and Adults for Barack Obama, and our young people are losing faith in our democracy, and they are not participating. People across the board are not participating in our elections because we don't think that that anything is going to change based on those elections. We need term limits because the way the system has been rigged creates an overwhelming advantage to incumbency. When you look around and see that the approval rating for Congress is under 50% on a regular basis, but the re-election rate is always over 80%, sometimes over 90%. There's a problem. There's a rig in the system. So we need term limits so we can take away that fierce power of incumbency. Certainly it shouldn't be based on age, because there is no age at which a person is automatically, sort of stripped of their value and ability to contribute. But we certainly need a time-based limit on how long you can be in Congress. And that needs to be paired with more reform so that we don't take a system that's rigged and turn it into another rigged system. So yes, we need to change the way we fund our campaigns. We need to make sure that we change even sometimes the way that we vote. So we look at ranked choice voting, score voting, and other different ways.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Senator Jacqueline Collins.
Thank you for the question, and I will wait till you can see me, I guess.
I believe that, did we start with Pastor Chris Butler?
Okay, hi. I think I'm up now. I can see myself.
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. We confronted this issue in the Illinois General Assembly, and I have a little switch on how we view it in reference to term limiting. I don't believe in term limits for members, but I do foresee possible term limits for leadership within a caucus. That way, various members have an opportunity to serve, and the term limit on leadership, to reach leadership, you usually have to be there for a length of time. So they could go back to being just a plain member instead of leadership. And the reason I don't agree with term limits is because if you get someone in there that is really doing a good job, and yet you have to, if the term limit expires in 4 years, you're losing someone who's actually been able there to serve their constituency. I think elections should be the determining factor of how long you serve in the particular office, and it has to be based on what you bring back to the community, how you serve that community. We don't want to take the agency away from the people. The power really is in the hands of the people. We just have to go back and give civic education. That's why I passed legislation to put civic education back in the school system, so people, the citizens, know that the power is really in their hands when they come out and vote. So in that sense, I don't believe in term limits for members, but possibly for the rotation of leadership in the Congress.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next candidate is Steve Dejoy.
It's Stephen Dejoy. And you know, there's a song that I love called where there's 525,600 minutes in a year. And when you think about it, that's a long time. And so in 2 years, if you haven't garnered the support of the community to the extent where they understand your capacity and the work that you've done, then the ultimate interview for the next term is when they vote. And so I agree that term limits, you know, are a critical aspect of it. But the most important thing is that, you know, the litmus test, when the voters see you at the polls, and what I think the community is saying is that they don't want politicians to come out into the community and be present only when it's the election cycle and when it's time to vote. So with me, I plan to be in the community from day one, and I plan to be in the community throughout the term of the campaign. But I also plan to load my administration with young people, a variety of young people that will be ready to serve in my stead once those term limits are hit, if necessary, or other voters choose another candidate. You know, we're not chosen to be in these jobs for a lifetime appointment. And so I think it's important that we bring in young leadership. You know, Harold Washington, same issue as a catastrophic death at his absence. You know, we've got to groom young people to go into government and give them that pathway. And I think that's the obligation of an incumbent. And so our term limits important, yes.
15 seconds.
But I think the ultimate judgment of the candidacy's term in office is the vote on election day.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Alderwoman Pat Dowell.
Thank you. When I think of term limits, you know, I serve at the pleasure of the people who elected me, my constituents. And I believe that elections are the barometer for how an elected official is serving you. If you're not doing your job, people will vote you out, period. And I believe that you have to give an elected official an opportunity to serve you. And that means bringing people along, educating them about what you're doing in office, what your plan is. First of all, when you become an elected official, you have to first understand how that particular government works. Then you have to take into consideration what might be changes in the economy. For example, a recession that hit us in 2008, 2009 impacted the ability of most elected officials in this state to be able to do their job, but you have to explain that to people. Sometimes the work product that you're working on may take a multi-year to have an impact. And so these are important
15
considerations. And as you become more involved in your position and get more seniority, you have more power, so to speak, to bring back the resources for your constituents. So I don't believe in term limits.
Thank you. And our final candidate is Jonathan Jackson.
Hello. Hi there. I do not believe in the term limits. I believe that election day is term limit day. What I would like to see is campaign finance reform. When many of the incumbents are in office, now they are raising a bulk of their money in special committees between Washington, D.C., with lobbyists and PACs, between New York City and Beverly Hills, and a few major cities in between there. I don't think all of this money should be going across state lines. That I don't think that the person that's in Washington coming from a very poor district that's being funneled and fueled with cash from lobbyists is fair. So I would like to see major finance reform. I know money does give a voice, but unfortunately it can be used in a very manipulative fashion. And I like to think of that the money should not matter as much, but unfortunately it matters too much. So we have to get that out of the way.
Thank you. Has everyone had an opportunity to answer this question?
Mhm.
All right, appreciate it. Then our next moderator is Janae LaFleur. She is our Church and Society treasurer. Janae?
Good afternoon, everyone. We're now going to move to our last question, and this should be viewed as your closing comments. The question is, what is your overall vision for the citizens of the district? Again, that is, what is your overall vision for the citizens of the district? And we're going to begin with Mr. Kirby Brigham.
I want to first again thank you guys for putting together this forum, giving myself and all the other candidates a voice, and to be able to lay out their platform and their vision for Illinois' 1st Congressional District. Over the years, I have gathered up this one phrase, and it's called Sarabona. And what it means is it's a Zulu greeting. It's not like a regular greeting, like a hello and goodbye. It means that we see you, we see your humanity, we see you as a person. And so I say to the people of the 1st District, Sarabona. And I'm able to say that is because I'm part of this district. I was born, raised, and educated in this district. Went to Chicago State University, South Shore High School, and Horseman Elementary School. And I have born and raised to parents that suffer from substance abuse. I see the neglect that's in this district. And as a science teacher, I get to see the inequities as well. And so my campaign see these things as human rights issues. We're seeing intergenerational poverty, and we want to go and tackle that. And the way we could do that is by first Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, because this is going to bring jobs and it's going to help with our environment policies. I want to also make sure that we tackle gun violence. I see this as a national health crisis. And so in order to fix these things, we must elect individuals that are not just of the community and in the community, but a part of this community. I'm drinking the same water that everyone else drink. I hear the same gun violence as everyone else here. And so please go to my website, Kirby Brigham for Congress. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Pastor Chris Butler.
Thank you all so much, Trinity, for hosting this opportunity for me and for these other candidates to join you today. The vision that I have for the 1st Congressional District is one in which people like me who are raising families, like my wife and I raising our 5 little children, the families that I pastor here at the church, the families that I've worked with over the years as an organizer, the families that I've talked to over this last year running for this office, that they are put first in our Congress. Many of the people on this forum, we all agree on most of the issues, as do 221 other Democrats who are in Congress right now. The problem is we don't have enough folks who are ready to challenge the system. Even go back to our last question. You heard a lot of description about how the system works. It's time to change the system. We can no longer tinker around the edges. We have to have large transformational change in our government and in our Congress. And that's going to take somebody who is able to work both across party lines and within the caucus, able to challenge people across party lines and within the caucus and move things forward. I have been able to do that in my ministry. I've been able to do that in my career. I remind folks of David, who had 8 sons go before him, 7 sons go before him, who all looked like they were going to be the one who would be able to get it done. And it ended up being David, who had been out in the wilderness without much notoriety, just quietly doing the work. That's Pastor Chris Butler. I ask your support on June 28th.
Thank you. We will now move to Senator Jacqueline Collins.
Thank you. Should I wait to?
Yes.
Okay.
There.
Okay, thank you. I'm running, and I would hope I would have your support because of the urgency of now, and the stakes are too high. No one in this race has a better track record on taking on the tough fights and winning for the people. I am the only candidate in the race that has passed landmark legislation that affects the lives of people over the 1st Congressional District. So my vision for the 1st Congressional District is to have good paying jobs, to have decent and dependable health care, to have Medicare for all, and for safe places to live. That has been my legislative agenda, bringing justice and equity. My campaign is rooted in economic, social, and racial justice. So what do I have to offer you? I have not rhetoric, not promises, but a record, a legislative record of accomplishment. And with your support, and you will empower me to continue to dismantle the structural and institutional racism that has stifled the growth of the Black community. I want to run for Congress to give justice a seat at the policy table in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Mr. Steve Dejoy. I'm sorry, Dejoy, Mr. Dejoy.
Okay, that day must be so hard. Dejoy, Stephen Dejoy. And I just want to thank everybody for just including me today. You know, what I want to say is that, you know, this election is really a crossroad for our district, our city, our state, and ultimately our country. You know, it's important that we have people that want to participate and be present in the community. You know, the thing that I take the most pride in is the fact that I'm able to use 40 years of relationships to bring this community together. And I think that's what we need from day one. You know, there's no pamphlet or course that you take to become a congressional leader. What we need is a sense of integrity that can't be bought. I've been tested through years of experience in business. You know, I've passed that test, and I want to share the information and experience that I have from working in the different businesses and areas that I have. I care about the people of this district, and I care about our city. And it's time for someone to bring back the heart of democracy to our district. You know, the optimism we had when Harold Washington won, and of course, when Barack Obama won, it has to be returned to the leadership and to our community. So I plan to be the beacon for that. And you'll see me present on election day, and you'll see me present in the community long after election day, doing the same work that I've been doing for the last 20 years. So I ask for your vote on June 28th, not because I'm the best candidate, although I'd like to think that I have some skills that I think could help, but because I have a passion and a desire to leave this district and our city and our country better than what it is right now. And this is a moment that we all have to not point fingers, but join hands.
Mr. Dejoy, time.
Thank you.
Missy, we will now move on to Alderman Pat Dow.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Should I be waiting? Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak to everyone today. I'm running for the Congress because I believe in people. I believe in communities and in neighborhoods. And I believe that it's very important that we at this time in our 1st Congressional District restore the people's faith in what government can do for them. Too many times we see elected officials who, you know, just want to be in the role, or they're talking about rhetoric, but don't have a track record of actually doing things on the ground, making things better for people, involving the people in the community in that transformation. I want to do that across the 1st Congressional District. I think I'm the only candidate in this race who has actually had that experience, both of doing legislation and actually making projects lived at the community level, creating jobs, creating housing, doing all the work that's necessary to move the needle on a community that's been marginalized. The 1st Congressional District has pockets of marginalization. And as the next Congresswoman, I intend to move the needle on the 1st Congressional District by bringing in the resources necessary to invest in the dreams of the people and of everyone else that I will be working with. I also want to focus on systemic issues we know: Voting Rights Act, reproductive women's rights, and gun safety. These are the things working at the top level and working at the bottom that makes our 1st Congressional District better. And I'm the person to deliver.
Thank you, Alderman Dow. Attorney Cassandra Goodrum, we'd like to hear from you.
It's Cassandra Goodrum, R-U-M.
Goodrum. Forgive me.
No problem. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Trinity. I appreciate your efforts to put this together and to allow us to have a voice in this election. So I am a product of the South Side of Chicago, grew up in South Shore, raised my family in Chatham. I went to DePaul and Northwestern for law school. I joined this race, and my vision for this first congressional district is that I can see us profitable and peaceful and having generational growth and generational wealth within our communities. We have to start by first proving that the value of life is what is important in our communities. And sometimes we don't see that in our elected officials. If we value life, then we make the efforts to make sure that people are safe. I also believe we absolutely envision a country and a first congressional district where everyone has equal access to voting, because that is critical for us to move forward. As I envision this first congressional district, I want to make sure that we have equitable educational opportunities. I want to stimulate that new green economy so that we can have cooperatives that are.
15 seconds.
I also want to decriminalize cannabis, as I've said. I want us to have that generational growth, that generational wealth, and I will use all of my abilities to bring these resources back to our first congressional district so that we can, in fact, be profitable. Thank you. And peaceful.
Thank you, Attorney Goodrum. Next, we have Mr. Jonathan Jackson.
Hello. I don't see myself on the screen yet. Hi there. I am running because the first congressional district is in pain. When there are parts of Inglewood that have a life expectancy of 60 years and Streeterville 90 years, one of the largest life expectancy gaps in the entire nation, I have a vision of closing that gap. When I saw the schools being closed in Chicago better than 10 years ago, 50 elementary schools at one time, I thought that was absolutely outrageous and disgusting. I remember Spencer Leak Sr., when he was the warden at Cook County Jail, he said that the prisons are based upon 8th grade or on third grade reading scores. 10 years later, that would make that third grader who's 8 now 18. These children that are now wilding out are also products of the violence that happened to them on the massive school foreclosure. 50 elementary schools that disrupted teachers, that disrupted communities, that drove down home values. I have the audacity to believe that we should be able to fight and raise our voice. When there's $1.2 trillion that has been approved for Build Back Better, I don't want to see that money pass us by. We have to go in that room on day one, have relationships with other congressional leaders, be willing to raise our voice and demand our fair share. We have been shortchanged consistently on the South Side of Chicago, on our transit grid, on our communications grid with internet speed. We should have free broadband so that companies will also think to locate in our neighborhood. We are at a structural disadvantage. I want to close the structural racism and gap for the South Side and the first congressional district.
Thank you. We will now hear from Pastor Marcus Lewis.
Please don't wait, just.
And how much time do I have?
90 seconds.
All right, thank you. First of all, it's Marcus Lewis. You won't see Pastor Marcus Lewis on the ballot, but I thank you anyway, because I am an ordained minister and I will not shy away from that. First of all, it's not about me, it's about us. Look behind me. You see us in my name. The issue of it is that this seat is not an heirloom that is to be passed down from one sold out individual to another who will be absolutely approached to sell out when they get to Washington. That's not what we're about. The people have been tired of being abandoned by these charlatans that are running to have the job, but not do the job. I'm here to do the job. This is my 7th consecutive run for Congress. A quitter doesn't win and a winner doesn't quit. I'm here because I actually want to serve the people. I want to be a servant for the first congressional district residents. because they need somebody that will have a champion, that will bring forth the issues that they're not hearing. They want someone that they know from the ground up
15
that
seconds.
Marcus will absolutely bring forth the issues that we want and need to hear about. It will be Marcus Lewis that will bring forth the plans and strategies and tactics to counter the Republicans that more likely will take over the House in the November election. Vote for Marcus Lewis. Marcus Lewis for Congress.org.
Thank you. We will now hear from candidate Karen Norrington Reeves.
Thank you, Trinity, and thank you to the Church and Society group, as well as Pastor Moss and First Lady Moss for this opportunity. As I understood your question, you asked, what is our vision for this district? My vision for this district can be summed up in one word: thriving. Our district needs significant economic investment, economic development. That is the key to stemming the violence that we're seeing. It is the key to addressing the rising inflation. It is the key to addressing the lack of affordability of healthcare, the lack of affordability of just the general cost of living. And so I am the only candidate in this race with a deep, lasting, strong national record in job creation and economic development. And what we know is that the cornerstone of economic development is job creation, and not just any job, but a quality job that allows us to not only take care of ourselves and our families, but to build generational wealth. Most importantly, this is not about minimum wage or livable wage. This is about thriving wages that allow us to invest in ourselves and our families. And so I ask for your vote on June 28th. My name is Karen Norrington Reeves. You can learn more about me and my record at votekarin.com. That's KARIN.com. At the end of the day, this race is not about legacy building. This is not about dynasties. This is not about names. This is about who is going to do the job and who has a record of job creation within this region. It is for that reason that Congressman Rush has endorsed me to succeed him. I've earned his full support, and I hope to have yours as well on June 28th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Norrington Reeves. Moving on, we have candidate Robert Palmer.
Okay, you said not to wait, so I won't. I am from Inglewood. My vision is that I would like to see not only people of Inglewood, but of the entire district have better economic opportunity, healthcare. I want mentorship for the youth. There are a lot of people in the community who have their hearts in the right places. Some of the elected officials, you see the state of the community, and some of them have been in office for years. It's time for a change. If it's not working, let's try something else. We have violence interrupters that can help the community, and some of them, they need to be invested in and maybe funded. I'm unapologetically Black as well. You can vote for Robert Palmer, and you can please check me out on Facebook at Robert Palmer for Congress in the 1st Congressional District. There's no reason why our community can't look like Saginaw. And I'll say that some of the rappers in our community get more respect than some of our elected officials, and that's terrible. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Palmer. Candidate Jonathan Swain, may we hear from you?
Thank you, Trinity, for hosting this forum. It's great to be with you and have a chance to answer a plethora of questions. You can go to my website, Swain for us, and you can get a sense of my 20-year track record of leading the community, both in government, business, entrepreneurship, and youth. But my vision for the district, I recognize this. For the past 25, 30 years, we've always put the onus of our problems in our community on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 leaders that we're asking to solve the problem. And the truth of the matter is the problems have not been solved. The problems will in our community only be solved if the people in the community believe again. So my vision is that I want people in the community to believe it again, to believe in the promise of the community, to believe in the hope that they have within their hearts and within their homes, and to believe in the future that we can build together. This is not just about electing a person to go to Congress to write legislation and to represent you on the floor. This is about selecting a leader that can build infrastructure that people can believe in so that we can collectively walk this journey to making the first district the district that we know it all can be. My office is on 87th and Cottage Grove. I remember what it was when I was a kid, and I know it can be that again. It only happens if we can believe together, walk together, journey together, and fight together for the things we know we are entitled to and deserve to have. So I'd ask for your vote on June 28th, Punch 48, Jonathan Swain. I'm the last name on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swain. Candidate Charisse Williams, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you to Trinity and the whole community for having us here today. I'm running because we deserve better. We deserve to have a district and a community that represents everything that we're supposed to get, that we finally get the resources that we've historically been ignored. I'm running because our district still looks the same now than it did 20 years ago, while you go a little up north and they're changing the tulips every other week. I'm running because I want our children to feel safe. I want my 21-year-old son who just begged me for my car as he walks out the door, that I'm not worried that he won't come back. Even though we have a very diverse district in the first district, we all want the same things. And this race isn't about any one of us. This race is about all of us. We all have this opportunity to build hope and have real change in our everyday lives, so that we no longer have to walk out the door and be concerned about our property tax is going to go raise up again. How much are we going to pay for gas this time when we go to the pump? And will there be food on the shelves again? We're running because I think we all want the same thing, but we have to have the right person in Congress who can be unapologetic about the needs and be able and have the success to bring those resources back to the district. I have that success. I'm the only one that has success with federal and state funding to be able to bring that back to the district and give it to the community most impacted by the harm. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Orgain.
Thank you. We've come to the end of the question and answer session for our candidates. Thank you to our viewers, to our candidates, to our committee, our moderators, and all those who have participated who I haven't named. Viewers, there will be a vote to registration tip information shortly, so please stay tuned a little longer for those tips and our closing prayers. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, our senior pastor, Reverend Dr. Stacy L. Edward Dunn, our executive minister, some of those persons who helped put this together, Reverend Dr. Mark S. Barclay, Reverend Jasmine E. Taylor, and there, thank you so much, you see it on the screen. Reverend Daryl E. Brown, Director of Social Justice and IT, Donna L. Hammond-Butts, Multimedia Communications, Adrian A. Williams, Member Services. And again, our CIS Forum Committee, Luther Henry, Linda Knowles Franklin, Janae LaFleur, Dr. Neva Lubin Johnson, and Michelle Mcgee. And excuse me for the tongue twisting. Our candidates, our audience, and many others who made this day possible, thank you. Candidates have other engagements and may need to sign off. We appreciate you extending your time with us this afternoon. And now we'll show all of those election tips for our remaining audience.
Thanks for having me on. Have a great Sunday.
So much. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a good day.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so kindly.
Shalom.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Trinity.
you.
It's been a pleasure and robust discussion. So what we wanted to do and what you see here was an article from the Chicago Tribune entitled "A Guide to the Illinois Primary Election, including the key dates, where to vote, and the highest profile issues." It was published on May the 19th. And so please put yourself on mute. The link, if you can go back, please. The link is there. And we will attempt to put that into the chat, but the link is there. And if you can move forward. Perfect, we're putting it into the chat. Wonderful. It is now in the chat for those participants. Next slide. This is just a summary of that information in regards to election dates. The primary election being June the 28th, and be aware that the general election is November the 8th, always on a Tuesday. And so these dates are available. And just so you know, this forum will be available on YouTube. And so this information will still be available after YouTube. Next slide. The statewide offices on the ballot, as you can see that, we have 1 Senate seat, 2 seats for the Illinois Supreme Court. All of the Illinois representatives for Congress, all of the state senators, and all of the state representatives, as well as the gubernatorial, attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, and numerous other county and judicial offices. We'll also have a video on Trinity's site, trinitychicago.org. Next slide. That ends our presentation, acknowledges, that ends our forum. Again, thank you to all who have remained, and I will now turn it over to Reverend Darrell E. Brown for our closing prayer. Reverend Brown.
Thank you. It's actually Minister Brown. I'm not a reverend. People are real particular about that. So
thank you
just
so
want
much
to put that clarification out there. Shall we pray? Dear Lord, we come to you thanking you for this opportunity for the many candidates that are running for iconic Bobby Rush's seat in the 1st Congressional District here in Illinois. We hope, Lord, that they were able to share and people were able to understand their positions on the various issues. We ask, Lord, that as our population in that district are considering who to vote for, that in their heart, they understand that they are voting for someone to represent the people, and that that person will have incredible responsibility to bring resources into very needy neighborhoods, areas in our city that have been often neglected, that have suffered from disinvestment, that see rising rates of crime, that our people are criminalized, our young people are seen as criminals instead of the potential they have for doing positive and wonderful things in our world. And Lord, we just pray at this moment that whoever receives the vote is a strong, powerful representative of the people, and that they be guided by your will and your purpose for our people through their work. Lord, we ask these and all things in Jesus' name. We also want to thank you, Lord, for the people that put this together. We thank you, Lord, for our senior pastor and our executive minister, Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, senior pastor, Reverend Dr. Stacy Edwards Dunn, executive minister here at Trinity United Church of Christ, and for all those members of our church and society ministry that put all of this work together to gather these candidates, to get this information to be shared amongst your people. Lord, be with us as we depart this place. Keep us safe, care for our families, and until we all meet again, whether virtually or in person, that we will have love to share amongst each other. We ask these and all things in the most wonderful and magnificent name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And everyone that loves the Lord said, amen.
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 That ends our Trinity United Church of Christ Church and Society Ministry Candidate Forum, May 22nd, 2022. Be safe, choose life for you, your family, and the community. Consider vaccination and mask wearing. Thank you. Be blessed.
Bye.
I just want to say thanks to everybody. Javette, you hung in there and
in recording
together.
Just a minute. Let's let the recording end.
And let's let the attendees go down to 0.
I'm so sorry. I hope you can take it out.
That's okay.
No problem.
That was a good one, but didn't want to go further.
Oh no, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Go back to mute. Go back to mute until the attendees have departed.